The gentle sound of morning birds chirps softly in the distance as we begin our story. A quiet neighborhood in Riverside, California, is just waking up after the Thanksgiving holiday of 2022. On the morning of Friday, November 25th, 2022, as families in Riverside, California were still resting after their Thanksgiving celebrations, a quiet cul-de-sac called Price Court was about to witness something profoundly disturbing. The day began like any other post-holiday morning. Homes were still with residents enjoying extended sleep after festive meals shared with loved ones. At approximately 6:58 in the morning, a red Kia Soul parked in the neighborhood. From it emerged a man wearing a tan trench coat, a black fedora, and a face mask. He carried a black duffel bag and a plastic bag. The individual walked around the area for a while, pausing outside one particular house before returning to his vehicle and driving away. This pattern repeated twice more. A neighbor, noticing this unusual behavior, contacted the Riverside Police non-emergency line to report the license plate. Since no actual crime had been committed, all they could do was make a note of the information. Around 9:00 a.m., Michelle Blandon received a telephone call from her mother, Sherry. Sherry's voice carried an unsettling tension as she explained that a detective was in their house asking to speak with Michelle's 15-year-old niece. The detective had mentioned something urgent happening near the girl's school. Sherry, who was 65, lived in the home with her 69-year-old husband, Mark, a volunteer high school softball and baseball coach, their daughter, Brooke, who was 38, and Brooke's two young girls. Everyone was concerned about what might be happening. They wondered if the teenager had done something wrong or was in some kind of trouble. Sherry mentioned that only she and Mark were home as Brooke had taken her daughters out. The officer indicated he would wait until they returned and would need to interview everyone separately. The situation seemed quite serious. Michelle tried to reassure her mother that it was probably nothing significant, encouraging her to remain calm. Sherry asked the detective if Brooke's other daughter could be dropped off at Michelle's house while they sorted everything out, and he agreed. All they could do was wait for Brooke and the teen to return home. The detective informed Sherry that he would need to speak with the adults first, and when the teenager arrived, she would have to wait in the car along with both her own and Brooke's phones. Michelle felt increasing anxiety as none of this seemed normal or appropriate. However, she trusted that her mother would not have opened the door for just anyone, let alone permitted them inside. The man had presented himself as a police officer with a badge and authority, which had given Sherry reason to trust him. A short while later, Brooke arrived at Michelle's house to drop off one niece, and Michelle observed as Brooke and her 15-year-old daughter departed for Price Court. Michelle called Sherry again to inform her they were on their way and to check if everything was all right. Sherry's voice trembled as she struggled not to cry. She mentioned the detective was still present, but before she could elaborate further, he took the phone from her. "I'm here with your mom," he said in a reassuring tone. "She is kind of being anxious and freaking out. Everything is going to be okay. It's all okay." He returned the phone to Sherry, and Michelle strained to hear their conversation. She heard the detective say that as part of his investigation, he needed to search the teenager's room, specifically mentioning the room with Green Bay Packers memorabilia. Michelle felt uncomfortable at the realization that this person somehow knew the interior layout and contents of her family's home. Before she could express her concern to her mother, Sherry said, "I'll call you back," and ended the call. Michelle had no choice but to wait, so she attempted to dismiss her worries and went into town. Eventually, Brooke arrived at the house, going inside, while her daughter remained in the car, as instructed by the officer. Some time later, Michelle sent a text message to her mother requesting an update, but received no response. At 11:08 a.m., emergency dispatchers received a call requesting a welfare check at Price Court. Several residents were worried after witnessing a man leaving a house with a visibly distressed young girl who had no shoes and appeared to be silently mouthing words to onlookers, though they couldn't determine what she was trying to communicate. The pair walked toward a red Kia Soul parked in a driveway, the same driveway, in fact, where the homeowner had earlier reported the vehicle's license plate. As they approached the car, the resident opened their door and told the man he couldn't park there. The man apologized and said he was departing. He opened the rear passenger door and the girl entered. He then walked to the driver's side back door and placed the black duffel bag inside. As he turned around, the neighbor noticed what appeared to be red spots on his clothes, possibly blood, though they couldn't be certain. While the girl wasn't physically forced into the vehicle, something about the situation felt deeply concerning. Before the man closed the doors, the girl quietly whispered, "Help me," and the car quickly drove away. Michelle, who was still in town, received a Facebook message from one of her parents' neighbors that read, "Please call me ASAP." Shortly afterward, more calls came into the Riverside Police Department reporting a house fire at Price Court Mark and Sherry's home. Michelle and her husband immediately drove across town while repeatedly trying to call her mother, father, and sister, but no one answered. When they arrived at Price Court, authorities were already there addressing the fire. Windows were breaking due to the heat, and the roof was beginning to collapse. As firefighters entered the home, they discovered the bodies of Mark Sherry and Brooke lying close together near the front entrance. Each had a plastic bag over their head and had been bound and gagged. They were already deceased, and neighbors watched in horror as they were removed from the house. Michelle and her husband arrived shortly afterward, and she attempted to run past the police tape before being pulled back. Her parents' and sister's vehicles were still parked outside, and although it was too early to confirm who had been inside, Michelle soon learned that several bodies had been recovered. As a shaken, Michelle was escorted to the police station. Officers were tracking the red Kia. She informed them about the strange phone calls from earlier and the detective who had been in her parents' house. She emphasized that there was no way this individual would have gained entry without showing identification, as Sherry would never have allowed a stranger inside without proper credentials. Though the police were not yet confirming details, when Michelle described her father's distinctive tattoos, a Green Bay Packers logo on his left arm and a Notre Dame mascot on his right, she was confronted with the devastating reality she had been trying to rationalize her mother. Father and sister had been in the house, and her niece was now missing. Despite initial speculation that the fire had caused their deaths, autopsies later revealed that Mark Sherry and Brooke had likely died from asphyxiation. They had been bound and gagged before plastic bags were placed over their heads, and Brooke's throat had been cut. Evidence indicated that Mark was killed first and that Brooke had fought vigorously against her attacker. 3 of the family's dogs also perished in the fire along with their pet bird. A 4th dog, which had been in the backyard, survived and was taken to a shelter until a new home could be found. For the small, quiet community and everyone who knew the family, it seemed impossible that such a tragedy could happen in their neighborhood. Around the same time these events were unfolding, approximately 2,000 miles away in Virginia, a woman was filing a missing person report for her boyfriend, of 5 years who had suddenly departed and was now unreachable. The couple had been celebrating Thanksgiving together in San Diego with her parents when he unexpectedly began packing to leave, claiming he had exhausted his vacation time and needed to drive back to Virginia, where he had recently purchased a house. This abrupt change wasn't part of their original plan, and the drive would take over a day. She was unaware that he hadn't set off for Virginia at all, but instead had headed for Riverside, California. She would soon discover that it was her boyfriend who was now fleeing with the missing 15-year-old girl. Using the license plate, information provided by the neighbor police in Riverside eventually located the red Kia as it traveled toward Kelso, an unincorporated area of San Bernardino County on a remote rural road. They intercepted the vehicle with a SWAT team and helicopter joining the pursuit. The driver eventually stopped and exited the car, firing his weapon and showing no intention of surrendering. A brief shootout followed as the girl fled from the vehicle. Within moments, the driver was dead. Some reports indicate he turned the gun on himself, while others suggest he was killed by police gunfire. The 15-year-old, whose identity has been protected, was found alive and unharmed. She was placed in protective custody, and along with her sister, began an extensive process of trauma counseling. A GoFundMe campaign raised over $100,000 to be given to the girls. Upon learning of her niece's rescue, Michelle praised the neighbor for diligently reporting the license plate and persisting with authorities believing these actions had saved her niece's life. The man who had kidnapped the girl and killed her family was identified as 28-year-old Austin Lee Edwards, an active Virginia State Deputy Sheriff. Surprisingly, the teenager told authorities she did know Austin, having met him online, though he wasn't who he had claimed to be. They had connected on Omegle, a free online chat platform that randomly pairs users for anonymous conversations using the names You and Stranger. She had been honest about her age, but Austin had misrepresented himself as a 17-year-old. Investigators couldn't determine how long they had been communicating or how he had obtained her address, but at some point, Austin had requested sexual photographs from her. After this request, she stopped corresponding with him. Detectives theorized that he might have killed her family as retaliation or believed that kidnapping her would prevent her from reporting him. They also considered the possibility that he possessed explicit images of her and was attempting sextortion. His messages revealed an obsession, indicating he would stop at nothing to reach her. With over 1 million pages of social media content to analyze, investigators acknowledged that understanding the complete story would take considerable time. The community gathered outside the Winnick family home on Price Court in Riverside, with neighbors holding a vigil for the family killed the day after Thanksgiving. At the memorial, the victim's daughter expressed gratitude for the community's support. "Thank you for being here honoring my family," she said. "To see all of you out here supporting and giving us your strength. We really need it, and we are really appreciative." Members of the Arlington High School baseball team attended the vigil because Mark Winnick had been their coach. The team shared that the world would never fully understand what he meant to them, and other students who attended mentioned how he had positively influenced their lives. Rides home after school, he would always talk to us for an hour. 1. Remembered. "One of my favorite memories is when my sister hit a walk-off, and he just gave my sister and I a big hug after the game." The organizer of the Candlelight Vigil, Joy, noted that Mark Winnick was a local coach who always watched over the neighborhood. "I just feel so much sorrow for the family," she said, "and I wish I could do more and more and more." Investigators confirmed that after setting fire to the home, the suspect left with another relative. The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department later verified she was safe following the pursuit and confrontation near Needles. The teenager told police that on the morning of the incident, she had no understanding of what was happening as she and Brooke arrived at the house. Following Brooke's instructions, she had waited in the car, but when it became too warm, she removed her shoes and stepped outside for fresh air before cautiously entering the house to investigate the situation. Upon walking through the door, she immediately saw her grandmother Sherry with a bag over her head and her hands bound. Sherry was still moving slightly. Before the girl could process what she was seeing, Austin appeared, pointed a gun at her, and ordered her to leave with him. It remains unknown where he was driving her or what conversations may have occurred in the car. With Austin deceased and unable to provide his account, investigators turned their attention to understanding who he was and what they could learn about him. In July 2021, Austin Edwards had joined the police academy, and after graduating a year later, he was assigned to Henrico County within the Richmond Division of Virginia. He resigned from the department after a few months, though no reason was documented in his personnel file. A month after leaving Austin, maintained an association with the Washington County Sheriff's Office and joined the Patrol Division as a Virginia State Deputy Sheriff less than 2 weeks before driving to California. In a small town with fewer than 2,000 residents, Austin had purchased a new home. Neighbors described him as friendly and felt a sense of security knowing a police officer lived nearby. Austin had spent considerable time darkening all the windows of his home, but less than 10 days after moving in, both he and the Winnick family would be dead in another state. According to Smith County, Virginia records, Edwards had recently purchased a home in Saltville from Jacob Gordon. "I had the house on the market for just a few hours and I got a full price offer," Gordon recalled. "I was told it was a Virginia state trooper. He was only behind me for about 8 days. He was actually very nice, accommodating. He offered to help me on my home." After purchasing the property, Edwards appeared to have covered the windows and installed dark curtains. "I thought it was really weird," Gordon noted. "The owner told me also that he required that they sent a video of the basement. I mean, he didn't see the property before he purchased it, but he required a video of the basement, which seemed really weird." Another neighbor commented, "The guy who lived in front of him that I know said that he had a very strange presence, that the guy was very weird, creepy, kept to himself. He didn't get out a lot. Short time here, he already set off alarms." As the investigation unfolded in Washington, a woman scrolling through Instagram encountered a photograph that made her pause. It was Austin. Not only was the news story disturbing, but she also had her own troubling history with him. She had met Austin on Omegle as well. He was 20 at the time, she was just 13, and he had groomed, stalked, and harassed her for years. "I read the whole story, and it made me feel disgusting," she said. After learning about what happened to the Winnick family in California, the now 21-year-old woman approached authorities with nearly 4,000 messages between them from years earlier. Austin had initially been sweet and conversational, and she had immediately disclosed that she was 13, but this didn't discourage him from continuing their communication. He soon began requesting nude photographs and professing his love for her. He frequently mentioned self-harm as a form of release. During one exchange, he insisted she join him on Skype. "I can't yet," she told him. "Why's that?" he replied. "Because my mom," she answered. "Kill her," he responded. "I'm going to give myself a black eye." "Okay," she replied. "Listen, there's no obstacle that's going to stop us from being together. If that's what we both want. It doesn't even matter if you're 14 and not technically allowed to do shit yet," he said. She eventually terminated contact with him, but he persistently tried to reach her. The messages also revealed a significant incident from 2016, 2 weeks after the teenager had told him she no longer wanted to communicate. Austin was detained for psychiatric evaluation after threatening suicide and violence against his father. Police had been summoned to the home by Austin's father, Christopher, who they found trying to restrain Austin on the kitchen floor, which was covered in blood. Christopher had bite marks on his arms. Officers prepared to use a taser, but Christopher indicated he could manage the situation, still attempting to protect his son. Austin was eventually handcuffed, secured to a stretcher, and admitted to a hospital. He explained that he had argued with his girlfriend and was acting out in anger, his girlfriend being the 14-year-old who was trying to distance herself from him. Despite blocking him on every platform, he created new accounts and consistently found ways to contact her. The harassment continued for years until she turned 18, when it suddenly ceased. It's unclear whether this coincided with his meeting the 15-year-old online, though the timing aligns with this possibility. When committing Austin to a mental health facility in 2016, the judge stated there was a substantial likelihood, as a result of mental illness, he will in the near future seriously harm himself or suffer harm. The incident also led the judge to revoke his gun rights under Virginia law, which stipulates that anyone held on a temporary detention order and subsequently admitted to a treatment facility is prohibited from purchasing or possessing firearms until those rights are restored by the courts. His gun rights were never reinstated. On his application to the academy, Austin disclosed that he had voluntarily admitted himself to a mental health facility, which required him to undergo a mental health evaluation and examination, which he failed. Austin used his father, a close friend, and his Virginia State Police field training officer as references for the academy. Despite the failed evaluations and the court's revocation of his gun rights, he was still accepted. Michelle and her family sought answers about how someone with Austin's background could be hired by law enforcement, but initially received little response. The Washington County Sheriff stated it was shocking and sad to the entire law enforcement community that such an evil and wicked person could infiltrate law enforcement while concealing his true identity as a computer predator and murderer. But the Virginia State Police claimed he hadn't displayed any warning signs. They described him as the nicest person who loved helping people in his job, adding that he had no reprimands, no complaints, no instances of use of force, levied no internal investigations, and no disciplinary investigations. Michelle noted that no department ever apologized or even acknowledged her family's loss for a considerable time. In a public statement, she said, "My family and I truly appreciate the love and the compassion that we have received thus far in this trying time." If something like this horrific tragedy can happen here in our neighborhood, in our community, it can happen anywhere. In this tragic moment of our family's grief, we hope some good will come from this. She continued, "Parents, please know your child's online activity. Ask questions about what they are doing and whom they are talking to. Anybody can say there's someone else, and you could be in this situation, which I do not want for the world. This horrific event started with an inappropriate online romance between a predator and a child. We have some solace that this person will never harm anyone again. But we also want to make it very clear that we do not applaud his death. This was an adult that traveled across the country to kidnap a 15-year-old girl, my niece, our family member. He took an oath to protect, and yet he failed to do so. Instead, he preyed on the most vulnerable. When you hear the term catfishing, you think of a long-running dating show or series about a national sports figure, both glamorizing and sensationalizing online relationships. However, in this instance, catfishing led to the deaths of the three most important people in my life. Please, parents, guardians, when you are talking to your children about the dangers of their online actions, please use us as a reference. Tell our story to help your parenting not out of fear, but as an example of something that did happen. There are no words for the gratitude we feel for the outpouring of support that we have received. And I know that we will continue to receive from my two young nieces who are now left motherless. We hope that this community can wrap your arms around them and lift them up. They have the most difficult journey ahead as they are minors, and they don't understand everything that has happened. We hope and we ask that this community continue to shelter them. Please positively support them. Eventually, the Virginia State Police issued a statement describing it as an isolated incident, adding that human error resulted in an incomplete database query during Edwards's hiring process. They stated that had they known about his history, he would not have been hired. Riverside Police Chief Larry Gonzalez commented, "It's disturbing. It's disgusting. Anybody in the law enforcement community, we hate that person more than anybody because it's a reflection on us." This is yet another horrific reminder of the predators existing online who prey on our children. If you've already had a conversation with your kids on how to be safe online and on social media, have it again. If not, start now to better protect them. After these failures came to light, Governor Glenn Youngkin requested a comprehensive investigation by the state's watchdog agency. A subsequent agreement allowed the Virginia State Police to conduct an internal investigation. Michelle and her family filed a notice of intent to sue regarding Austin's hiring process and the failures that had occurred. We want to know why this person was able to get hired by not one, but two agencies, and given a firearm when he couldn't legally buy one, she said. Her attorneys argued that Austin's employers demonstrated negligence, gross, negligence, negligent, and gross, negligent hiring breach of mandatory duties and other violations of Virginia state law. They contended that the family's damages exceeded $100 million. Though Austin is deceased and unable to provide information, police continue to examine his past, his laptop, and his phones to identify potential additional victims and construct a more complete understanding of his actions. However, with so many pages of messages from just two individuals thus far, investigators acknowledge they could be uncovering details for years and might never fully know the truth. Mark, Sherry, and Brooke, along with their beloved pets, died in frightening circumstances, terrified, and trying to protect one another. Michelle described them as people who lived and loved selflessly. Mark was deeply appreciated by the young athletes he coached, leaving a significant impact on many, with some indicating he had shaped their futures and career aspirations. He would regularly check on former players to see how they were progressing in college. His neighbor remembered him as someone who never rested and enjoyed staying active, often offering to mow others' lawns to help them and occupy his time. Sherry cherished being with her family above all else. Celebrations like Thanksgiving and Christmas were her favorite times of year, when everyone could simply be together, and she would bake cakes and cookies for her children and grandchildren. Make munchel? We had a family debate, and it got heated on if the brownies my mom made should be frosted with sprinkles or just left plain, Michelle recalled. Little did I know on that day that would be the last time my husband and I would see my parents and sister again. Brooke was a single parent, and Michelle said her greatest joys were watching her daughters grow and collecting Starbucks cups. Brooke was telling everyone that her daughter had joined the color guard at school, and nothing made her prouder than watching her. Michelle remembered with a smile. For the girls and Michelle who remained, it is impossible to imagine how they face each day. Celebrations such as birthdays, Christmas, and Thanksgiving will never be the same, and what should be joyful family gatherings will always serve as painful reminders of what was taken from them. In a touching tribute, Price Court in Riverside was ceremoniously renamed Winneck Court, with the sign placed next to the Winneck home. Eric Mark's nephew and godson reflected Mark and Sherry's pride and joy were their kids, and by extension, their grandchildren. You never saw them beam so brightly than when they were around their family. As night falls over Riverside, the neighborhood grows quiet once more, forever changed by the events of that Thanksgiving weekend. The memory of Mark Sherry and Brooke Winneck continues to echo through the community they loved, a reminder of both the warmth of family bonds and the importance of protecting those we hold dear.